Hey guys, Tammy here, and in this video, we're going to talk about trash talking in child custody. Now, if you played sports when you were young, you might be accustomed to a lot of trash talking. Both of my boys played basketball in high school, but one in particular, I think, was a little bit worse for the trash talking than the other. But this is very easy to do in your child custody situation because there's a lot of emotions, and let's face it, breakups are negative, right? And neither side is usually too happy. And so it's kind of a natural reaction that we would be angry and that we would talk about it. But this can really become problematic. Before we dive into this topic, let me just remind you, as always, if you like this content, hit like on the video. Also subscribe to the channel so that you get notified as new videos are released. And I always appreciate it when you share it on social media. I'm going to start with saying that one of the things that my late husband Thomas used to always say is always speak well of those who are not present. And that was just kind of a mantra of him for his life. And honestly, he included his ex-wife in that. Now, it wasn't always great in the beginning about not trash talking her at all, at least to me. But he was always really good about not doing that in front of the children. He told me this story where when they went through mediation when they did their divorce, and he had a coach. And so he, obviously he was an attorney, and so he was able to navigate that part of the process himself. But he didn't have another attorney. He was his own attorney, but emotionally, he knew that was a whole different ball game from the legal side of it. Although it impacts the legal outcome, as I say frequently, he went and got a coach to work with to help him with the emotional component of this and to help him, frankly, with his custody case. So that he could set himself up with the highest probability of coming out with an equal timeshare on his parenting. He was sitting with his coach in one of the sessions, and all of a sudden his phone rings, and a 5-letter word that starts with a B, that hopefully I don't need to tell you, popped up on his phone. And his coach said, "Who's that?" And he's like, "Oh, my ex-wife." And his coach said, No, we're not going to do that. And, it's kind of funny because we don't always think about those little triggers that can cause things. But what that was doing was anytime he got a call from her, it was reinforcing the negativity. And can you imagine that's already popping up? Then that puts him in that state of mind. That's the context he's thinking about her in before he picks up the phone to talk to her, right? How do you think those conversations went? Probably not too good, because I'm already thinking what a B you are before I even pick up the phone. The coach said, "Look, you don't have to," he's like, "I can't stand seeing her name pop up." And he's like, "That's fine. You don't have to use her name or whatever, but let's find something more neutral that doesn't have any, context for you." And so Thomas thought for a minute and he said, "Okay, how about George?" And his coach was like, "George?" And he's like, "Yeah, I don't know anybody named George. I've never known anyone named George. And George really has no emotional meaning for me." And his coach was like, "Okay, George it is. I want you to change her name in the phone to George." And so he did. The funnier part of this is that is what he and I referred to her as after we got together. So his children were 1 and 2. They were very young. We could have conversations sometimes about certain things without them being aware, as long as we didn't use her name. They were pretty oblivious, or at least we never knew that they figured anything out if they did. And so we went about happily calling her George for a couple of years, until one afternoon from the back seat, the 4-year-old says, "Who's George? Is mommy George?" And I remember sitting in the car like it was yesterday, and Thomas and I looked at each other, and it was like, okay, I guess these conversations are no longer happening in front of the children. From that point on, we just, would say mom or mommy, and we just made sure we didn't really talk about anything that was, anything significant or whatever. Just if her name came up in context of something, we would just say mom. Her and I have actually talked about this after the fact. And at some point, she also figured out that he was calling her George. I can't remember exactly how she figured it out, but she did at some point. But what that did is it framed her in a neutral way for Thomas so that he could emotionally be able to refrain from being in that negative mindset around his children in particular, or speaking poorly about her to the children. Honestly, speaking poorly about the other parent is one of the fastest ways to get yourself in hot water with the court. And it's one of the more common, negative behaviors that we see from co-parents in the court. And, Thomas used to always say, like, deep down, I really want my kids to like me better. And I think we all feel that way to an extent. If we were honest with ourselves and honest with other people, like, I want to be the better parent. I want to be the one you like more. I want to be the one that, loves you and all that kind of stuff. And, I think logically we know that's ridiculous. I'm not in a competition with my kids' dad. Kids have a capacity to love beyond anything that adults can do. And they have room in their heart for a lot of different people and a lot of different roles in their life. And so my kids can love their dad fully and still have enough love to love me fully as well. But when you're going through this and you've been through this negative experience with the other person and you're just in that mindset, it's really hard because everything in life starts sort of being framed by beating them, right? And that's why we trash talk, because it makes us feel better about ourselves and makes us feel like they're a horrible person, and it sort of feeds that negative energy, which will make you feel better temporarily probably, but it's not going to make things better in the long run. And this again becomes one of those long-term, short-term trade-offs that I talk about a lot in the custody process. When we're going for that short-term gratification, it almost always means a long-term detriment. And in the case of trash talking, it gives you sort of that short-term satisfaction of being able to vent, get your feelings out about the other person, say nasty things, hope I'm, turning the kids against them and everything else. And then over the long run, it becomes, oh, my children have anxiety. I've put my children in the middle. The court is coming down on me now because, I'm being accused of alienation and all these different things. So you have to really check your own emotions and refrain from not doing this in the very first instance. I think that the other piece of it that's kind of more subtle that I don't think people always think through is, when you have children, your children identify with the other parent. They're going to have most of the time, Thomas's kids were adopted, and I know that everybody's got their own variations in their family, but for the most part, the children take on characteristics of you, right? And even with Thomas's kids, like, they may not be biologically his, but I'm telling you, they have his characteristics. His older one kind of has his social way of moving through the world, and kind of his interaction with other people. He's very intelligent. And then the younger one really got Thomas's sense of humor and his sort of childlike quality of just, being young at heart and enjoying life. So they do have characteristics of Thomas, even though they are adopted. And so when you're trash talking that other parent, what you don't realize is in the child's mind, especially younger children who don't have the cognitive ability to understand these things yet, it's kind of like, okay, well, parent A doesn't like parent B, but I'm part parent B and part parent A. So if parent A doesn't like parent B, does parent A dislike all the parts of me or dislike me in some way for being like parent B because I'm a piece of them, right? Children, especially like, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? In that range, we start to understand that we are biologically a piece of that other parent, or we're similar to them from being raised in the home or whatever it is. They identify with that parent. And if you don't like that other parent, then that can make the child start to think that you don't like them either. And I've seen children really internalize this. And I think a lot of times this becomes a lot of the identity type of issues. I've seen this happen now in 2 different cases that we've had where children have transitioned to the other gender. And honestly, it's been for both of them several years post-divorce, both of these cases that I've known about. And I think, in my personal opinion, a lot of it has to do with this child identifies with the parent that trash talks the other parent. But the other parent that's being trash talked is a lot of times the parent that's the same sex as the child. So, and I have one in each, one in a mom case and one in a dad case. So like in one of them, mom has a daughter, dad is trash talked, and now the daughter is transitioning to being a boy. And I think a lot of that has come from the child struggling with their identity because, oh, I don't want to be like mom because look at all the horrible things that dad thinks about mom. And then I have had it on the opposite end where mom is trash talking dad, and now the boy wants to be a girl, and again, this is just my personal opinion. I think it has a lot to do with that self-identity with the other parent. But regardless of whether I'm correct or not about those issues, it does create a problem for your child where they can feel unloved, they can feel rejected, or at least feel like the parts of them that are like that other parent are rejected. And I don't think we think about that too much because a child doesn't verbalize that. They don't know to verbalize that. They don't have the maturity level to be able to connect those dots. And therefore, it's important that you, as their parent, know that anything that you say about the other parent might make you feel good in the short term, but it's really going to hurt your child in the long term, as well as your court case. But, court cases are court cases and someday they're over. But a lot of times the suffering for the children is the piece that goes on and on and on. And frankly, it's what motivates me to do this job every day is, seeing the impact to children and children in my life that have been through this process and been through parents that have cooperated, parents that haven't cooperated. I've seen child impacted by negative and positives of every type of parental relationship that you can imagine. And I'm telling you, the way you behave and the way you talk about the other parent makes a huge difference. Now, look, if you're dealing with a narcissist, you got to have your boundaries. You got to not communicate. You got to do all those things. That's a given. But trash talking the other parent reaches a whole new level, right? For the damage that's done to your children. So if you'd like to get some coaching and some help around this issue or any other issue that you're struggling with in your child custody case, you can go to divorceuniversityonline.com/VIP-coaching. There's a link on that page. You can book a time to speak to a member of my staff so you can learn more about my services and how I might be able to support you on this journey. See you guys next time.
We'll grow in number, fueled by them to see the horizon, turn us to thousands.